We are here in the bucolic English countryside in a secret location, which is sort of my natural environment. My other natural environment is with a racing car, and I'm here to tell you about this very special car. You might recognise this car, of course, because it's the true star of the new F1 movie. Forget those actors, it's all about the cars, isn't it? And we're going to get a really good close-up look and a deep dive into how this car was built and how it operated throughout the production of that new movie. And I'm really excited to show you all of the details on it. To take a really close look at this car, I'm joined by Graham Kelly, the action car supervisor?
Action vehicle supervisor,
Action vehicle supervisor. Wait, what does an action vehicle supervisor do?
Well, in the real world, not the Formula One world, I'm responsible for the department that puts all the cars together for car chases, and I do all the engineering for that, and then we go and put a load of stunt people in cars and go and play.
Go and play. I mean, there's a lot of play with this car. Now, looking at this very different car, and we'll get into the technical details shortly, but I'm going to start with some general questions, because how many of these Apex cars were built?
That's a good question, actually. So we eventually ended up with 6 full-blown cars that looked like this. One had an electric motor in it, 400-volt electric motor in it, which we used for pit lane, which actually saved our life in the pit lane. We've never been able to achieve what we did without having that electric car. And then we had 4 cars with full-blown mechachrome, competition engines in, and 1 car that I kind of ended up developing another engine for, which we used as a camera car, and we bounced it off of things and I also built another 6 what we call crash cars, which we drove remotely. They were tubular frames, and they were essentially just built to drive into walls at speed, and that worked very well. We ran out of them pretty quickly.
Looking at the front end of the car here, because that's the best place to start on a car, the aerodynamic package on this car, or the visual package of this car, shall I say, is very different to the car it's based on, isn't it? And how did this car transform from its original form into what looks to me like a slightly odd wheelbase Formula One car?
Well spotted. So essentially this is a Formula 2 tub. And in the early days of this, that seemed to be the best way to go. You get a Formula 2 car that exists, that has data and support, and run with that. I kind of looked at it and I thought, we're never going to be able to use this alongside a real car because it's too short. So we added a 200mm spacer into that between the gearbox and the engine to try and make it, at least feel a sort of similar size to a Formula One car, which is still 200mm short. At that point, Toto Wolff's company, Applied Science, did all the aero package on it for us. So all of that is designed to look more F1, but also work because we've extended the wheelbase. Front wing, getting quite a lot of load on that. It's pretty good, but it is designed to look like a Formula One wing. So.
No, it very much does look like a Formula One wing. You've got the roll tips here, you've got the end plates. This one's clearly been in a bit of a race moment. I think Sonny Hayes had some fun with it up against the wall and on both sides. But look, there's little details here. So you've got the tyre temperature monitoring pods on it and things like that, and real F1 details like the stays between the different wing elements. I mean, are you even having to go through the flexibility tests with the FIA?
No. But we were using all the data points on the car. So we were measuring, the load we were getting. We used tyre temperatures and all the rest of it. We were measuring all that. We needed to, because trying to merge a race world with the film world was really difficult. And we needed to, none of the data existed for this car, obviously. Even though it's a Formula 2 car, it's stretched. So we needed to gather data from the car and make sure we understood what it was doing.
The nose looks a bit different to me as well to the standard F2 car. Did you have to do re-crash testing, or is this a different structure?
So that the nose cone itself, the crash structure, we kept because of that, because it had been tested. The front wing was adapted to fit to a Formula 2 nose because of the crash testing that existed. So we didn't really want to get in. We didn't have time to do that.
One area I absolutely love looking at on any racing car is the suspension layout. And you can see on this car that you guys have put together, you've retained the pushrod front suspension layout of the F2 car. But this front suspension doesn't look anything like F2 front suspension. Same elements, but different shapes.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's clad to make it look like a Formula 1 front suspension. I mean, this is obviously dressing to make it look like a Formula 1 suspension and braking control. This gave us some problems, actually, because this, on the Formula 1 car, controls all the airflow over the brakes, and it's how they can, keep the heat in it, and which is exactly what we didn't want to do.
Right.
So we there was some modifications going on with that as we were going, partly when we were finding out the data, and coupled with the fact that we had actors driving and not race people, proper professional drivers. So brakes weren't getting up to temperature, and then they were overheating, and so there was a lot of learning curve in this, just because we made it look like a Formula 1 car that wasn't functional.
So one of the key elements, you mentioned the brakes overheating there. I mean, you did have people who aren't professional racing drivers drive the cars. You had, major actors driving them.
Yeah.
So not only do you have to get the braking system so they can cope with it, but it's also got to be safe and work.
So there was obviously a lot of training, and the elements of training, the most important element of that was for Brad to learn how to bring the brakes in, how to bring the tyres in, and the important part about how much weight to put onto the pedal to get the brakes in. We went through different compounds. The electric car had steel brakes for obvious reasons. I mean, he was in the pit lane and he just had to stop and go and stop and go. We tried different compound of carbon brakes, non-competition carbon brakes, and these brakes, and Brad in the end understood the difference between all of that and was actually really good with it. And so that was a sigh of relief after the first year, that we knew what we were doing with the brakes, and Brad knew what he was doing with the brakes. Brad's a great driver. I mean, I'm not just saying that. He was a great driver. Took instruction very well as well.
Well, that's pretty impressive. With the front suspension as well, in terms of the setup and suspension arrangement inboard, did you have to make any changes to the car to be able to be coped with by the actors?
No, car was pretty good. We started with the car at a good height, so we had plenty of, we were in the tolerances.
You're talking about the ride height off the ground.
And then they were complaining pretty quickly as they got used to driving the car, and so we started dropping it, and they were getting faster and faster and faster, and that was when I started getting grey. But yeah, no, we played around with the setups quite a lot, and per track as well, as you would do normally, So yeah, no, I mean, it was very neutral. The front wing was very neutral. We started tuning it as the drivers got better at driving it.
Oh, really? So were they actually getting competitive, trying to get better lap times?
Brad's more competitive than anybody I know. Yeah, no, Brad's lap time was coming down consistently all the way through, and Damson's was as well. But Brad is the driver out of the two.
So Brad was quicker than Damson?
I'd take the fifth on that.
Well, let me push you on the tyres, wheels and tyres on the car, because to most people's eyes, these look like Formula 1 wheels and tyres. You've got the standard wheel covers. I've seen that you've got some mock-up versions and some proper Red Bull developed composite versions. Yeah. What's going on with these wheels and tyres, though? Because I've been reading the sidewalls of the tyres, and it's not quite as it seems, is it?
No. Well, first of all, the car, we had to run the car on Formula 2 tyres. basically because if we'd have put Formula One tyres on the car, we'd have had too much lateral grip at the back, and then we'd end up getting problems with gearboxes and suspension and all sorts. So we were running the car on a Formula 2 tyre. Again, part of the problem with the film process is merging with the race process was that we weren't really getting the tyres into the window they needed to be without, at the beginning for sure, but without kind of moving the car through and understanding it. So we ended up, right at the very beginning of the film, I mandated that all the tyres, regardless of the colour on the wall, should be softs. I went testing in Ascari and decided that was a stupid idea. And we actually ended up with hard tyres on quite a lot of the tracks we were on.
But why was that? Because they were easier and more stable?
I thought that the soft tyre would be easier to get into temperature, which is actually the opposite. And they'd be more durable for us. So, in our sort of 2 laps out and filming, then bringing them back in to talk about it and then sending them back out again, I thought that the soft tyre would be good until we started loading the car up properly at Ascari, which is where I tested it when it first came out.
I mean, one thing that's really blowing me away is just how serious a car this is. This isn't just a movie.
It's a proper car.
Yeah, this is a proper racing car.
This is a proper car.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a 200-mile-an-hour car.
208 miles an hour, apparently.
Yeah.
Moving on around just the tyre management, you do have the real Pirelli tyres on it from F2.
Yeah.
You've mentioned the compound using, but at the moment we're looking at a set of full wet tyres.
Yes.
Now, a movie about Formula One must include wet conditions, but you can't control the weather, right?
The car performed perfectly in the wet. The driver performed perfectly in the wet. All the tyres did their jobs. The cameras didn't like the wet. So basically, you couldn't see much when it was raining, which was a problem when you've got Brad Pitt on, paying him to reflect light, and you can't see him. It's not good. So we didn't do a lot of wet work. We did do some wet work in the pit lane, because that kind of worked for us. I mean, it was really, basically, we couldn't see much. We're following cars, as you know, and you can't see it on the TV when the Formula One is racing.
Looking in the cockpit, looking at the steering wheel here, I'm guessing that is not a standard F2 steering wheel because it looks a little bit more F1 specification than maybe you might see in Formula 2.
It is a standard F2 steering wheel, but we've painted it fancy colours to make it look more interesting from the camera that was here.
Now, in terms of the electronics on board the car, now I was there when some of the filming was taking place on some of the circuits, and a lot of races, the onboard camera from Formula One, that T camera on the top, wasn't fully present, but there was an extremely large camera that I didn't recognise. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, the car, basically we had cameras looking at Brad in that position next to the halo on both sides. We had one in front of the halo, which is a little difficult to mount. And we had cameras up here and then various cameras positions off of the car. They were all 8K Carmans that were built for us by Sony. So they're all, we had the lenses up here, all the bodies were in the front floor. Although we had something like 12 positions, we could only run 3 cameras at a time.
Right.
Because we just didn't have the room in the floor for more bodies.
Now, we talked about the aerodynamics of the car because you are, by the very nature of the film, having to run the cars super close to one another, and that's going to have an effect on the aerodynamics as well, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it did. There was the cars were getting a bit. It was a lot of disturbance from the other cars. I mean, it wasn't as similar as a Formula One DRS train, or if you're following hard and fast behind another car. It wasn't that so much, but they were getting in each other's way, and there was a bit of a wash off the cars, which was giving us giving the drivers all sorts of problems.
Now, I look down here at the floor. Now, you've already told us that the floor here was used to house quite a lot of the camera equipment, rather than the normal electrical boxes that F1 cars have down here. Is that in the bulge here that normally houses?
Yes.
So that's normally the lower side impact structure.
Yeah.
And so that bulge, so you're using the visuals of the car to actually serve a practical purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was crammed full with electronics because it wasn't just the camera bodies. We had all the RF equipment that was transmitting all of the data back to the screens in the garage, and we also had all the RF controls for panning the camera. And so there was a lot going on in there, and that didn't like the wet either.
Looking at the floor here, we've got what looks to me to be a modern Formula One ground effect floor, which is...
It's what it is, basically.
But that's very different to the Dallara F2, and I know Mercedes were involved in some of the aero work on this car. Is this a fully effective floor for
Yes, it is. I mean, not to the extent that a Formula One car is, but it definitely has an effect. In fact, there was this wavy line on the side was a story point. It was an update in the movie, and we put it on, and it did actually create a difference.
Oh, really?
Which was astounding, you know. I mean, don't forget, most of the time we weren't pushing these cars in a competition sense, but we were going fast, so there was effect from it, you know.
And you are seeing the general development work on here. But one of the big factors I noticed, we talked about this car being slightly shorter than the real F1 cars are. I noticed that the front wheels are quite close to the leading edge of the floor, and surely the floor leading edge is going to be in the wake of those wheels, and that's going to be distorting everything.
I think that most of that was dealt with by applied science in their aero studies. So it works. I mean, it was working. It was, yes, we were getting quite a lot of wash off of that wheel. You got a lot of squish coming off of it and the back, but the floor was dealing with quite a lot of that. So yeah.
Well, looking at the engine cover here, you can see quite clearly it's got AMG written on it. But in the back of this car isn't a 1.6 litre Mercedes V6 hybrid power unit, is it? It's something a bit bigger.
How do you know?
You can't actually tell.
It's a competition mechachrome engine, the F2 competition mechachrome engine, 3.4 twin turbocharged. And we didn't want to change much there, obviously, because it's a proven, thing. All the tub works with it, gearbox works with it. I put the spacer in the middle. That all seemed to work with it. So yeah, it was a controllable power unit. Again, I thought at the beginning it probably too powerful, but Brad was complaining about speed in the end, so he obviously got used to it very quickly.
Are you sure he just wasn't practicing some lines on you that Lewis had taught him?
Yeah, maybe.
But the mechachrome engine it's a well-proven engine. It's been in a lot of different race cars, but you do have the ECU, the electronic control unit, on the engine, and you can put different maps into that. Were you running what we would expect to see, or...?
We were not allowed to go anywhere near that. I had to have a win-win engineer who the company that looks after the mechachrome at the Formula 2 races. We weren't allowed to go anywhere near the ECU on the cars for obvious reasons. I mean, it was a current competition car. All the teams would have loved to have got some information out of that ECU, but no, the ECU was sealed. There wasn't much we could do with performance, actually, engine performance at all. We could change gear ratios, but that was it.
Because this is an engine designed to run at really high speeds around high-speed circuits, everything from Monza to Monaco. You're doing very short runs, filming runs, maybe not all at full speed, or some speeding up, slowing down. Did the engines really cope with that, or were there some struggles because it was out of its sort of designed window?
The engine, they were struggling with our process. That became obvious very quickly. I think the first day we were at Silverstone, our first day of filming, we had the cars on the back of the grid, and we walked away traditionally as you do, and cars were running. The difference between these and Formula One cars is that these don't have a starter motor, and so we basically waited longer than we probably should have done. They will overheat in a minute and a half. We were right on that limit because we were at the back of the grid. Everything pulled away, and one of them didn't, so we had to get it off. But that was great. We did that again, and it worked perfectly. But yes, the engines gave us a problem. The engine in our process of doing a run, coming back in, talking about it, going back out again, doing a run, we were playing with temperature all the time, and with brakes as well, not just the engines.
Well, that's one of the reasons, I guess, that you essentially have taken one of these chassis and gone out and, as I understand it, built an electric Grand Prix car.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Much to quite a few objections at the beginning of it, because of the experience I've had in the film industry, knowing the process that we go through, to have a Formula 2 car with a Mechachrome engine come into the pit stop, up with us doing a pit stop, filming it, stopping, pushing it back, doing it again, that would have lasted about 10 minutes before it would have gone catastrophically wrong. So I decided pretty early on in this process that we should build an electric car, which presented loads of other problems. But we took a 400-volt Helix motor, which is a very small motor, attached it to the input shaft of the gearbox, and with the room that we had left, we put batteries in. So we weren't sure how long it was going to last, but actually in first gear it would do 70 mile an hour.
Oh, wow.
And it would do 70 mile an hour backwards, and we would do that probably for 2 hours, and it was great. It really worked. I mean, it worked in every part of that process, because he could wheel spin out with all the torque. It's instant torque, so we weren't waiting for it to explode because it got hot.
So when you go and see the film, you'll see a car boiling out of the pit lane with screaming engine, but actually what you could be watching was actually the electric car, but I guess you can't tell.
No. Hopefully they put sound on and it'll sound like a fantastic Formula 1 car. I mean, it looked great. It was all sideways coming out of the pit box, sometimes sideways coming into the pit box. But no, it worked. We would never have, I'm saying this out loud, we wouldn't have done what we did in the pit stops without having that car.
That's pretty impressive that you've done that. Now, this wasn't the only variant of this car that was built. Now, you already mentioned you built one with a different type of engine in the back of 4-cylinder, but you also built some of these to quite literally destroy them, didn't you? A tube frame car.
Yes, which, had a 4-cylinder engine in it, was producing 400 horsepower that was on an automatic gearbox through a traditional diff that didn't have a driver. It was all being controlled remotely by a driver, but in a van. And, that took some development, but we ran testing, but actually worked really well. I mean, there's no other way to drive a car in a wall, hand on heart at 140 mile an hour with a person in it.
Yeah, I'm guessing the insurance probably wouldn't particularly...
No.
Yeah. And so you built a number of those cars, destroyed those cars.
Yep.
Different power. So there's 3 different iterations of the Apex car in the movie, but
Yes.
they all look the same and you can't tell them apart.
No, can't tell them apart. Obviously the sound's different, but that will be dealt with in post. The performance on the film looked the same. You couldn't have run the electric car on track because of the weight of the batteries. We can control the gearbox and change the gear on it, and it probably would have been faster than a Mechachrome was developing more torque, but the weight of the battery would have thrown it all over the place. The Mechachrome car was great for the track work. We were at full speed on the track, and then the camera car, which we put various engines in, a bit of development, and that car was in there. So yeah, I think we did all right in the end.
I was walking down the pit lane in one of the races where you were filming, and you had a full team set up. There was hospitality, but the pit garage was a pit garage. Okay, the screens maybe didn't give the data I expected. Some of it looked to be printed on, but it still certainly looked very good. Some of the power figures were quite surprising to my eye, but you really had an 11th race team in Formula 1, didn't you?
Yeah. And we didn't have just one of those garages. We had more than one. Again, we kind of soon learned that you needed to move around like Formula 1, and so we had a garage here and a garage there, and there was a lot going on. Nothing like a Formula 1 team in terms of the amount of people and the process and the efficiency, but we were pretty good. We became a team.
Yeah, it did look like a team because you were doing pit stops, you had the teams getting the car going. Now, some of the people who were in those pit stops, they're not actors, are they? They are racing team people.
Most of the guys were mine in the pit. There was 2 actors in there, but that sort of presented a bit of a problem because whilst we were dressed up as, a pit team, we weren't looking after cars. So it was a bit of a balance there. But very early on, I mandated that if you've got an actor driving at you at 60 mile an hour into a pit box, the people that are on the wheels need to know what they're doing. So it was us.
So it was a real pit crew and a real racing team.
Yeah. I mean, we weren't 2-second pit crews. We were more like a minute and a half. But, with the movie magic.
Well, you mentioned movie magic. The film is out now and it's well worth everybody taking time to go and see it at the cinema. For me, the cars are the real star of the film, but it is a fantastic show. And I urge you all to get along to the cinema and watch F1.